Hi everybody, this is Leotte-Keiva. I am currently in my daughter's room shooting this video because everybody is out in the living room watching the Game of Thrones episode. So hence my change of environment. Try to do my best working here. The topic that I chose to do my research paper on is working with young children living in poverty. Although I am a VPK teacher and also a director at a affluent preschool, it is upper class, higher socioeconomic families that do attend the preschool that I teach at. However, I do an after school program with my husband, and all those children are primarily children that live in poverty. So this is something that's very near and dear to my heart. So when I saw the topics right away, I said, yes, that's what I want to do. I came across a lot of great articles. It's very riveting. I'm very passionate about it. And I hope you enjoy the presentation, and hopefully you walk away learning something, having a little more compassion and understanding of children that do live in poverty. The first article that I came across was an online article entitled How Poverty Affects Education and Our Children, dated April 6, 2018, can be found on the Grapeseed website. It says there's 15 million children that are living in poverty. Their definition of poverty is a chronic and debilitating condition that results from multiple adverse synergistic risk factors and affects the mind, body, and soul, which is so true, and I couldn't agree more. Poverty is definitely something that affects children at their core and affects all aspects of their lives. Children that live in poverty are exposed to more stress, which tends to be intense and long-lasting. This can negatively affect their ability to focus, pay attention. It affects their cognition, their IQ, social and emotional skills, as well as their overall health and well-being. These children often live in an environment which has less complex vocabulary. They are read to less often than their peers that are not living in poverty. There's less communicative dialogue between the child and their parent at home. Children often live in single-parent homes, where the caregiver's focus and attention is often on survival and getting by, and not necessarily establishing a healthy, loving, and nurturing environment. Often, how to pay the bills, how are we going to keep the lights on, how are we going to eat today, is often their main topics of concern, and the child is often a secondary thought. Another article that I came across was Poverty's Long-Lasting Effects on Students' Education and Success. This is by Kelly Taylor, dated May 30th, 2017. It says 51% of pre-K through 12th grade students live in poverty, and the article talked about the long-lasting effects on children. It says the impact of poverty on a child's academic achievement is significant and starts early, says John Edelman, PhD, co-founder and chief executive officer of Stand for Children, a nonprofit education advocacy organization. He said young children growing up in poverty face challenges with cognitive and literary ability and often begin school both academically and socioeconomically behind their peers from higher income backgrounds. The article also says, beyond education-related deficiencies, low-income children can experience inadequacies with physical and cognitive development and disparities regarding access to health care and to key resources that help ensure success. Another article that was just excellent article. It's found online on Child Fund International website. It is called The Effects of Poverty on Education in the United States. Wonderful, wonderful article. It was so informative. I highly recommend it. I just want to read you some statistics before I get into further facts that I found. Statistics on poverty and education in the United States. The poverty rate in the U.S. is close to 15%, meaning 1 in 6 Americans live at or below the poverty level. More than 1 in 5 children in the U.S. are living in poverty. That's deep. More than 1 in 5 children in the U.S. are living in poverty. The poverty rate for single mother households is 31%, meaning almost 1 in 3 single mothers live in poverty. 6.8 million children, or about 1 in 11 of all children in the United States, live at 50% below the federal poverty line. 30% of children raised in poverty do not finish high school. People who do not earn a high school diploma by age 20 are 7 times more likely to be persistently poor between the ages of 25 to 30. Children who grew up impoverished complete fewer years of schooling and earn much lower income than people who did not grow up poor. Children who grew up poor in the United States are more likely to be in poor health. Families living in poverty have less knowledge regarding developmental milestones and how to support them. And that's such a key and important factor. I've learned, especially in early childhood education, I've been a preschool teacher for about 17 years. I am a mother of 2 teenagers. And parenting in general, parenting is OJT, you learn as you go. Preschool teachers have the benefit of being around many children on a daily basis. Therefore, they have access to a lot of experiences and gain knowledge that a lot of parents don't have. And so as a whole, under normal circumstances, parenting, you learn as you go. There's a lot of things you don't necessarily know, but those that are more educated, of higher socioeconomic backgrounds, have access to do more research, are around more people who tend to share their knowledge and experience of parenthood, and people that come from lower socioeconomic backgrounds, they are at a disadvantage because there's so much they don't know, especially about certain milestones and things that you should be looking for as far as your child's development. They're definitely at a disadvantage because they don't have access, because a lot of times communication amongst the families is not about those things. Again, their primary train of thought is usually on survival. So unfortunately, a lot of kids that live in poverty do tend to have developmental delays or things that may have been noticed by a more attentive parent or parent that was more informed. That unfortunately goes by the wayside when you're living in an impoverished home. Another statistic from this article says parents and caregivers raising children in poverty may be less available due to work demands and less able to supervise and facilitate positive developmental opportunities for kids. Again, these parents, their primary train of thought is how to get by. A lot of them are on the grind. A lot of them have multiple jobs. A lot of these kids are latchkey kids. And, it's truly sad, but it's a factor, and this is definitely real. And when it comes to parent-teacher conferences, when it comes to getting in touch with parents, a lot of times, it's much more challenging when you're dealing with a family from a lower socioeconomic background. Children in poverty have been found to have shorter duration, poor quality, greater variability, and greater incidence of clinical sleep disorders. Again, you have to take into consideration the environment of their home, of their lifestyle, the amount of stress that these children are under, and it greatly affects their sleep quite frequently. Children living in poverty do not always have access to nutritious food, which can result in either malnutrition or obesity. Children living in poverty have higher rates of other negative health indicators that affect development, including asthma and exposure to lead. These are all factors that we, as their teachers, have to take into consideration. I really wanted to give you as much of a thorough background of poverty and the things that children face, leading into how do we as teachers deal with these factors. We need to be sensitive. We need to be in tune to these children. One of the most important things that we can do for children living in poverty is to create a loving and nurturing environment. Not a lot of affection and attention is often given to these children at home. And a lot of times you have to understand that's why a lot of times these children may act out. They're acting out often for attention because they don't get it. And often they don't care what kind of attention they get, whether it's good or bad, as long as they get attention. You see me, you hear me, and they'll act out in all kinds of ways to get that attention. So it's so important to understand, take time to step back, and especially dealing with children who live in these conditions. If a child is acting out, stop and ask yourself why. Why? What could be the cause of this? And quite often, it is often for attention. They need stability. These children often live in an environment that can be chaotic and unstable, and they need something that's consistent on a daily basis that they can count on. So having that daily schedule, that timed daily schedule that they know, okay, at this time we're going to do this, I'm going to come into school, we're going to do this, that gives them a peace of mind. Of course, things are going to come up throughout the day, a different activity here or there, but to have your general set schedule is so important, especially for these kids that tend to have a great amount of flux and chaos at their home life. So having that stable, consistent stability with you in your classroom, and that also goes to you as a teacher and your attendance and you being there and being committed to being there, because you're showing them you're making a commitment to them, and that's huge. That is a huge part of the rock on which they count on. That helps them tremendously in adding to the stability in that child's life. When we're teaching these children, focus on their positive attributes and strengths while we work on strengthening their areas that need growth and development. Please keep in mind, a lot of these children are very aware of the fact that they're different. A lot of these children are able to see that they know less than their peers, that a lot of their peers' families may be more involved than theirs. They see these things. They're very aware, and it affects them tremendously. So they often have a very low self-esteem and self-worth. So you giving them that attaboy, that great job, you're really boosting their confidence. Focus on all the little positive things that they do. That helps them so much. That's huge, huge in their development, in their growth. Focus on the things they can do while we work on those things that they need help on. That's tremendous. It's so important also to create a language-rich environment, because this is so often lacking in home. There's a tremendous lack of cognitive stimulation at home. These children often don't get read to like other children may. There's often not a lot of dialogue between the parent and the child. Quite often, the television is the most dialogue the child's going to hear, or the iPad. Well, I'm not even going to say iPad, because in these families with low-income, poor families, poor children, even that technology is not available to them. So we, as the teachers, need to make sure that we create a language-rich environment. I read a great article, online article, by NYU Steinhardt News, dated April 14th, 2017. The article is entitled, "A Double Dose of Disadvantage: low-income children missing out on language learning both at home and at school. This was a study led by Professor Susan B. Newman, whose findings were published in the Journal of Educational Psychology. She says, children's early exposure to a rich set of language practices can set in motion the processes they use for learning to read, including the vocabulary and background knowledge necessary for language and reading comprehension. Can't stress it enough. It is so important. Just have multicultural literature, especially books, literature, posters, things that reflect them and their culture, letting them know that they're important, that you value them as well. Make sure your classroom is inclusive. That's so important. Support them, celebrate them and their individuality in all ways, their ethnicity. Make sure your books really reflect that. Have great dialogue about their culture, different aspects of many different kinds of children. And that also includes children with disabilities as well. But it's so wonderful when a child can see someone that looks like them and they hear stories about people who look like them. That's wonderful. That's awesome. Read to your class. Read to your class, and keep in mind, especially with children that are poor, you may be the only person reading to that child. So this is a tremendous experience for them. I have found that children who don't really have access to books, they crave it. They look forward to story time so much. And if you do have a library at your center or your school, please start a library program where they can have access and take home a library book once a week and teach them the responsibility of that. That's wonderful. Have a book drive where you can give books away and let the children, and keep in mind, again, there may not always be somebody at home to read to them. So if a child does get a book, please take the time, if you can, to offer, well, can I read your book with you? Let's see what your book is about. And you be the person that shares that book with them. Pictures with labels. Label all kinds of things. So they see the item, they know what it is, and they see the word that represents it. You know, any way that you can enrich this child's dialogue, their language, their linguistics is huge, is tremendous. You're giving them a tremendous advantage and helping them in ways that they don't necessarily get at home. You know, again, this is a topic that's very close at heart to me, and working with children that are impoverished, the number one thing that I can recommend in helping these children is letting them know they are important, that they matter, that they are special. Any and every way that you can do that can change the course of this child's life. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you learned something. I hope you take the time to take a second look, a second glance, and assess what you're doing if you have any children that are impoverished in your classroom, and say, what can I do that might make a difference in this child's life? It is so important. And it's also, I don't want to forget, important that we make sure we have knowledge and access to resources that we can give to these families that may be of great use and assistance, like free health care, health screenings, social services. In Florida, the Department of Health and Children, the Department of Children and Families is wonderful. They have so many things that can help families, that can help children, especially with early early child education. It's wonderful. So that's an incredibly helpful site. I also came across a great article on the website called See Room 241. It's actually a blog by Concordia University in Portland, and this was dated September 10th, 2018. It is called How Teachers Can Help Students from Low-Income Households, and it was written by Brian Gatens. They had some awesome tips for teachers on things we can do to benefit these children. different ways that we can take action, as along with working with school administration to offer targeted help and guidance, working with social services. Wonderful idea, offering gifts and donations to these families, to these children when it comes to holidays. Keep in mind when you're planning activities in the classroom for children that don't have a lot of money when it comes to getting resources for certain projects. Be mindful when it comes to activities that might require parent involvement, knowing these children's parents might not always be available. Please take that into consideration. Some children might have been through traumatic experiences, and this article had some great tips about how to teach children who have been through trauma. And quite often, unfortunately, people and children that grow up in an impoverished home often do experience some type of trauma in some way, shape, or form. So this was an excellent article. Again, it's called How Teachers Can Help Students from Low-Income Households on the C, the letter C, Room 241 blog by Concordia University, Portland. You can find that online. Well, thank you so much. I don't know how long this video was supposed to be, but I'm looking like it's really long, and I hope it uploads okay. And thank you so much for your time. I'm Leotte-Keiva, signing off.